Hello and welcome to another session at the Student Zone at Microsoft Build. My name is Brian Clark and I'm a cloud advocate here at Microsoft. For folks that are using descriptive audio, I'm a white male with a backwards cap on and a gray shirt. Now that you've had a chance to learn about where to code in the previous sessions here in the Microsoft Build Student Zone, let's take it up a notch and learn how to code. I'm personally really excited about this session because I love learning new languages and then helping other people learn them as well. In particular, I've learned about C#, JavaScript, Python, and two of those we're going to be talking about in today's session. Before we get started, though, please make sure you read the Microsoft Digital Code of Conduct. Please be kind to each other and, be respectful. Thank you. All right, so first of all, we're going to get started with two presenters actually today. All right, that's exciting, right? 2 for 1. It's a 2-for-1 deal, folks. And I'm really excited about this because they are fantastic presenters. Our first one we're going to have is James Montemagno, who's going to be talking about C#. And then we're going to have Christopher Harrison on, who's going to be talking about Python. Now, this is going to be an engaging session, okay? We're going to be paying attention to the chat. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. It's a very beginner-friendly session. We want to hear from you. And I will be guiding us along and picking up those questions and asking the presenters for you so we can get those answered. So without further ado, let's bring on James Montemagno. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm excited about what you have in store for us. So I'm going to step away and I'm going to let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. I am ecstatic to be here with all of you. As Brian said, I'm James Montemagno. I'm a program manager lead for the .NET community team. If you are using descriptive audio, I am a white male with long brown hair. Today, I'm wearing a white button shirt with little black birds on it. And behind me is a bunch of monkeys on a shelf and a bunch of Nintendo video games. I am really honored to be here with all of you to talk about C#, which is my favorite programming language that I've been using ever since I found it in university back in the day. We're going to go through what C# is. We're going to talk about why you would use it, and I'm going to do some really cool live demos for all of you here today. So let's get into it. So what is C#? It's a great question. It's a programming language. It's a programming language from Microsoft. It's part of the .NET family of programming languages. C# is an object-oriented, open source, modern cross-platform language. It's actually one of the most loved languages on all of GitHub, so in the top 5. And additionally, the GitHub projects in and around C# and the frameworks that you use to build apps for web, mobile, desktop, IoT, machine learning, just about anything with C# are in one of the top tiers on GitHub and Stack Overflow as well. So what does this mean? Object-oriented, C#, when am I going to use it, and why is this important? Well, if we take a step back, we need to sort of ask ourselves, well, what is a programming language? You're going to learn about 2 of them today, C# from me and from Christopher, Python. Brian said, there's JavaScript, Java, there's all sorts of them out there, Rust, Go. And what's great is that a programming language is a way of giving instructions to a computer that they will carry out. You can tell it to write a line, read a file. You can tell it to display a user interface on your phone. Every single programming language has syntax. And what that means is it's like a language. Maybe you're speaking English or Spanish, for example, and there's special characters that you use. And that's sort of the syntax, if you will, of a programming language. So you give these instructions, which is source code, and you write and execute that inside of however you're running it, whether it be on a desktop machine or on the web. So I mentioned that C# is an object-oriented language. And the idea here, if we think of it in the real world, you think of the house or apartment that you might be in today or wherever you're at. We think of these things as records. Sometimes they're often called classes, but a record is a new modern class. And that's sort of the blueprint of what defines what is in that thing. So for example, if I look at a record of the house that I'm in, it's going to have 4 walls and 5 windows and a refrigerator on the inside. And I can also do things in the house, like open the door, open the garage. So we call those things sort of a record, which have contracts of what are on these things. Now, when I create that in memory, over here in quotes, in memory, as I say, let me create a new house, for example, that will create an object. So the idea is that you have a definition, and when you're running the program, you have an object. So just like you'd have a blueprint, a record, when you create the house, now it's an object in the real physical world. So for example, let's say an animal over here, or a dog on the bottom, we have some properties: breed, size, weight, color. We also have some methods. Those are things that we can do with this object. So it could bark, sit, fetch, run, and you could sort of apply these to real world concepts. And that's how I've always liked looking at programming. Is it's sort of like the real world, but in a computer form. Now, it's also a compiled language, and that's also really important to know about C#. It's a typed, compiled language. And compiled just means that when you write, code, you hit a build button, and what that does, it turns it into machine code that a computer can run. This is great because if you have a typo or you call something that doesn't exist, you'll get an error. So that's really important. The C# compiler is called Roslyn. It's completely open source. And like I said, C# is compiled. And what's nice about that is that since it's compiled, the compiler can analyze your code inside of an IDE, like a Visual Studio or a Visual Studio Code, and give you errors or suggestions. Sometimes this is called linting. You may hear this as well. So let's look at C# syntax before we write some. Now this is a little bit of code that writes a line to the console. So console is a keyword here, write line, and it says hello world. And we can also see we have some errors below it. So let's break this down and what is actually in this. First are things called keywords. So for example, using. I'm using stuff in the system namespace. So using system, I might have using math, for example. Console is also another keyword. It's sort of a special keyword that has some methods on it, like write line. Down here, we're getting some syntax highlighting, some errors in this case where console with a lowercase c is not valid. And of course, over here at the end, there's no semicolon, which is important in C# to close a line. So it's also giving us an error there. When I use this dot, that's how I access methods and properties, such as this write line. I can also pass in parameters. So here we're passing in hello world. And in this case, that is a string. So a string is a collection of characters. In this case, the words hello with a space and then world with an exclamation point. And then at the end, I use that semicolon to close it off. So that is kind of a key of what syntax in C# looks like. Now, there's a few things inside even of that example that you may have seen. And I mentioned the word string. And these things are called literal values. So they are values since it's typed. They're a type of value, such as a string, a character, which would be like A, B, C, an integer, which is a number, 0 through a very large number with no decimal points. A decimal has a decimal, so 48.6, and a bool or a boolean, true or false. There's many, many more included types inside of here, and those are the values that are there. There's also variables. So for example, a variable enables you to temporarily store a value in memory. So I could say var s equals hello world, and that s would be my variable. And we'll see this as I step through the code. Since C# is a compiled language, there's rules that you have to follow. You may have mentioned that there's may have seen that there's a semicolon at the end of a line. Casing matters. When you name a variable, you can only use almost everything except for special characters like a pound or hashtag or an ampersand. And additionally, there's some keywords that we'll see, which are those integer types, or those variable types, such as string and int. So we wouldn't have those there. Now, built into C# and many programming languages are also operators. So if you want to add a few numbers, multiply, get divisions, remainders, they're all there. There's also other little helpers to auto increment, such as plus or minus when you're adding or subtracting numbers. And those are all built into C# and other programming languages too, but they may look a little bit different based on that syntax. And then there's Boolean expressions. These are one of my favorite parts of programming, is that you can compare two different things. So you can say, is 4 less than 5? Yes, it would return true there. Is 100 greater than 200? No, false. You can also compare equals or less than, greater than as well, and equality operators too. So you can say if something equals or does not equal the value. So does 5 equal 5? That would be true. Does 5 not equal with the exclamation point? 4, true as well. These may look different in different programming languages, but this is what it looks like in C#. You can get started today by going to dot.net, dot.net/learn to code. This is a brand new page that we just launched this week that gives you everything you need to get started learning C# with Visual Studio Code and notebooks, which I'll show here today, and great free resources from Microsoft Learn and free online videos that you can find on Channel 9 and on YouTube. But let's go ahead and do some coding. Now, I am inside of a .NET Interactive Notebook. This is part of Visual Studio Code, and Christopher actually will show you something very similar when he does Python. It enables me to write some markdown or some just comments and then execute code right here. So I can write code in here. So what I can do is I can say console dot, and I get this IntelliSense. It's one of the really, really cool features of C# and .NET here is that I can just start typing code and it fills it in for me automatically. So I can say hello world, and I'm going to go ahead and end it with a semicolon and hit execute. And when it does, it outputs to the console hello world. Now we can use a variable, and I'll say name. I'm going to use a string here, and I'll say James. All right. Now instead of hello world, I could do plus name over here. And that will concatenate or add hello plus my name in the string. So here I can say hello James. There are a bunch of new features that are really great about C# too, like string interpolation. This is really popular in many programming languages. But what it enables me to do is use this special syntax here, these little squigglies here, that enable me to put that variable directly in line. So now when I run it, I get hello James again. Let's put hello James with an exclamation point so you know it's different. Very cool. Now I can also write a method. Remember, that would be something like if it was dog, sit, run, whatever. But here I'm going to say void, and this means that it doesn't return anything to me. I'm going to say name. That is the name of my method. I'm going to pass it a string of name, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill it in. And this arrow here basically says execute when I call this method anything after it. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just copy this code. Oops. This code right up here. So we'll say console.writeLine, and then I'll say hello name again. Now what I can do is I can say name James. I can say name Brian. And let's not forget everyone's favorite on this call, Christopher. So now I'm going to call this method 3 times. Hello, James. Hello, Brian. Hello, Christopher. All nice in order here. That's a way of creating reusable code. There's many, many things that you can do inside of C#, like do text entry as well, but I wanted to start with the basics here. But let's get into some space fun. I thought what would be really, really cool is actually to use some C# to do some calculations to see how far away the different planets are from Earth. So what I've done here is I want to create a record of a planet. Now we are going to note that the sort of definition or contract is going to be name in a distance. That's going to be our goal here. Those are going to be the properties that it has. So I'm going to say record, here a public record of planet, and I'm going to say string name, and we'll use a double here, which is just like a decimal of distance. And that's it. With just that single line of code, I now have my record that I can create new objects of. So let's go ahead and do that. So down here, we're going to create these planets that we have here, Mercury and Venus and Earth and Mars. This is how far away they are of the sun. So in my perfect solar system, all of the planets align perfectly, including everyone's favorite planet, Pluto. And this is how many million of miles away they are from sun. So Venus, how far away it is from the sun minus Mercury would give us the distance from each other. Or Mars minus Earth would give us the distance from Earth, or Jupiter minus Earth, same thing. So let's go ahead and turn these into C# records. So I'm going to say var Mercury equals new planet. And here we can see that it gives me IntelliSense. So it tells me that I need to put in name, which is going to be Mercury, and then the distance, which is 36.0. Perfect. Now I can go ahead and say Mercury dot, and I get that distance and name, which is really, really cool. So I get that IntelliSense. It's showing me what I have access to. Now I could write all of these here, but I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste in this code. So now we have all of our different planets all ready to go for us to use, including Earth inside of there. So now let's do some math. Let's see how far away, some planets are, for example. So here, let's go ahead and subtract the Earth versus Mars distance. So what I'm going to do here is say console.writeLine, because we're writing to our console. There are many ways to write to different files or to a debug log, but here console will give us the output here. And I'm going to say Earth or Mars dot distance, there it is, minus Earth dot distance. And what that will give us is how far away Mars is from Earth. And we can see here, about 6 million miles away, if they're in a perfect line, which obviously is true all the time. So now that we know how far away Mars is, what about every other planet? We could copy, paste code, copy, paste code, copy, paste code. But we can also use a very powerful feature of programming languages, and specifically C# called loops, which enables you to iterate or step through a bunch of different items in a list. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a list of planets. And this is a list. So if you had a little, note app where you had a list of items, here I've added Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So all of them except for Earth. And what we can do is we can go through each of them. And I'm going to say for each var planet in planets. Okay. So it's going to step through each planet and allow me to basically do some math on that specific planet. So what we're going to do is do console.writeLine again. And we're going to say, well, Earth over here dot distance minus planet dot distance. There we go, which is pretty nice. Now, what I can also do is I could do another line here. I could do console.writeLine. And I could say, planet.name, for example, here. And we can just see, which planet, how far away it is. So let's run it and we'll see, well, Mercury 57, Venus 26.8, Mars negative 48. Well, it's kind of weird. How can it be negative? Well, yeah, that makes sense, right? Because if we were to take Earth's distance minus a bigger number, it's going to be a negative number. So we can fix that up as we see here, and we see little poor Pluto here so far away. We can actually use built-in math objects in C#. This is really cool, system.math. It allows us to perform mathematical operations like you may do on your TI-83 plus calculator. Now, that may not be your calculator. That was my calculator in high school, at least my favorite. But you can do things like you can get an absolute value, get the max, min, a sine, a cosine, all those fun math and charting graphs that are out there. So for example, here, I have two values, negative 1.02 and 1.02. I can do some math here to get the absolute value of 1, the minimum between 1 and 2, and the maximum between 1 and 2. So here we'll see the absolute value of negative 102 is 1.02. The minimum is negative 102 and the maximum is 102. That makes sense there. That's kind of cool. It's built right into C#. So let's go ahead and now iterate through each of these planets one more time. And I'm going to get that distance. So Earth minus the planet.distance. And I'm going to say planet.name is the absolute distance million miles away. So here we go. Check this out. Now we have all positive numbers with our solar system that aligns perfectly, which doesn't make any sense at all. But in this case, why not? And Venus, about 25.8, Mars, 48.6, Saturn, 793.7 million miles away. And there you have it. Just that easy to start building really fun applications with C#. And this will all be available. And of course, all of the C# free interactive learning on Microsoft to Learn is completely free with all sorts of ways of learning then you can go and build awesome stuff like mobile apps, desktop apps, and web apps too. And there you have it, C#.
Excellent. That was fantastic. And thank you so much, James, for stepping us through that. I love the whole planet theme that we got going on with the Student Zone. So well done on that, keeping that in line. So are you open for some questions that we got from the audience really quick?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Well, first, I have one question. You mentioned that C# is the most loved programming language. And I have to ask, how do you measure that love?
Well, it is one of the most loved programming languages. GitHub and Stack Overflow, they do different surveys every single year. And I believe that one was from the Stack Overflow survey. So they survey everyone and say, what programming languages are you using? What do you like? What don't you like? And they come up with a magical algorithm that pumps out a number. And we're in the top 5. And we've been pretty consistent there, which is great.
Excellent. So a question from Leonardo in the chat. And thank you folks that are watching that are asking the questions. We'll try our best to get to yours as well. Leonardo asks, do I need a license for the tools that are used to get started learning C#?
Wow, what an excellent question, Leonardo. No, you do not. Everything is completely free and open source, and all of the tools are free as well. You can start learning today, one completely in the browser. You don't have to install anything. Our Microsoft learning modules are completely free, all online. You just do everything in the web browser. You can also use VS Code, which is completely free, or Visual Studio Community Edition, which is also completely free, unless you make $1 million every year. But if you do, you can probably give Microsoft a little bit of money for Visual Studio. That's available on Windows and on Mac as well, but all free.
As a lazy developer myself, I'm really glad that I don't even need to install anything if I wanted to get started. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
There. One last question for you, James, before we let you go. Ulrich asked in the chat, what is the name of that extension you were using for C# Notebook?
It is the .NET Interactive Notebook. And when you go to .NET, .NET/learn to code, there's a button right there that will show you exactly how to get VS Code and the .NET Interactive Notebooks. Or if you already have VS Code, just search for .NET Notebooks in the extension gallery. It's really, really fun, and they're all there ready to go.
Well, thank you very much, James. I'm going to have to kick you off now, though. Sorry, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye. It's been a joy. Thanks.
All right, folks, before we get into the next session, one thing I want to call out here as somebody that's got experience developing in other programming languages, some of the comments that I'm seeing in the chat, there's like, oh, this language is better than that language and whatnot. One thing that you will learn throughout your career, especially as you're beginning in getting into programming, is that regardless of the programming language that you use, there are common approaches to problem solving, and the language is just the tool. And some have pros and cons, some have better use cases in certain scenarios or not. But it's really important to focus on how to best be successful as a developer, regardless of the language that you're using. So while we're seeing some differences, and we're going to learn about Python now from Christopher Harrison, it's not about which one's better or not. It's about learning and getting better and being successful. So without further ado, let's bring on Christopher Harrison, who's going to talk to us about Python and how we can get started with that. You're on mute, Christopher. Gotcha. I did that to you. I'm sorry. It was a bad prank. You're still on mute. I'll let you off mute in just a second. In 3, 2, 1. I was just kidding. I didn't actually. You're on mute. Let's see. Let's see here. Christopher is on mute in Teams.
There we go. Okay, now we're good. Sorry, when you started counting down, I thought you were going to do it. So I didn't want to wind up in the situation where I take myself off mute and then you hit the button and put me back on mute. And then, now it's just we're stuck in that space. So anyway, without any further ado, Brian, thank you again for the introduction. Hi, my name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior cloud advocate. For those of you using descriptive audio, I'm a white male with very closely trimmed hair. I'm wearing a black shirt with the letters hack on it, just below the camera. And then behind me, I have bookshelves with various books, knickknacks, tchotchkes, and I also have a print of Calvin and Hobbes' first ever comic. Now, before I get in and take a look at Python, I do want to highlight something that Brian said a second ago, which is that there is no one best language, that you're going to find in your career that you're going to work with multiple languages. So on a daily basis, I use Python, I use JavaScript, I use TypeScript. I sometimes find myself using C#. You're going to find yourself using multiple languages, that each language is a tool, and every tool is going to have a job that it's built for. And so with that, let's take a look at Python. Now, Python is one of the most popular languages, especially for new developers, that you're going to find that its syntax and the fact that it's not overly restrictive on certain things is a nice way to get in and start building your skills and start exploring becoming a developer. Now, what's also wonderful, though, about Python is the fact that it's not just a beginner language, that this is a language that can grow with you, that you can use this to work with data science, with artificial intelligence, with web development. Really, the applications of Python are practically limitless. So you can start with the basics and continue to grow into really advanced applications. Now, I want to get in and start writing code. It's the way that I always love to approach things. And so I have a Jupyter Notebook up, very similar to the interface that we saw a couple of minutes ago with James. And I always like to start with that classic example of Hello World. Hello World is where we print out Hello World, that string, to the screen. Now, if we think about wanting to print something out to the screen, how might we print something out? Well, if you've been paying attention to my ever so subtle hints, it might be the word print. And so you'll notice that I've got print right here. And one really nice thing about Visual Studio Code and its notebook support is that it does start to help me out a little bit. Now, sometimes the help is going to be wonderful, that you'll notice that I start typing out print and it immediately goes, hey, here you go. This is probably what you're looking for. So right there at the top, there is print, and I can start to use that. Now, sometimes the help does get overly technical. I'll openly admit that, but you're going to find more often than not that this built-in help is going to help you. It's going to help point you in the right direction. So I want to print out hello world. So I'm going to say hello world just like that. Now, inside of a notebook, you're going to have what are known as cells, and you can then go ahead and run each cell. So I could go ahead and hit the little play right here. I really like to use shortcut keys though, and so I'm going to use Shift Enter, which will go ahead and run that cell and then move down to the next one. If there isn't one there, we'll go ahead and create it. So you'll now notice that there is that little hello world that's displayed out on the screen. Cool. And so this is typically where we start. And one thing that you are going to notice about Python is that it does try to keep its syntax relatively close to English. Let's make this a little bit more advanced though. Rather than printing out hello world, let's go ahead and ask somebody for their name. And so what I want to do here is I want to get input from the user. So how might we get input? How can we get input? Again, my really subtle hints, it's going to be input. And so when I say input, it's now going to go, oh, okay, we probably want to prompt something. We want to tell them, hey, this is what we're asking for. So I can say, what is your name? If I can spell that correctly. There we go. Now, what I want to do is I want to grab that value and I want to store that somewhere. So I'm going to store that into what's known as a variable. So a variable is going to be a placeholder for some piece of information that if we think to maybe like a little bit of like math class, and maybe you've done something like, 206 minus x equals 42, you then have to solve for x. Well, what is x here? It's a variable. It's a placeholder. It's a placeholder for a number. It's a placeholder for, in this case, 164. So just like we have that concept in math, we have that exact same concept in programming. So this is going to be a variable, and it will be set to whatever it is that somebody types in for their name. Now, unlike C#, unlike what we saw with James's demonstration, I don't need to preface this with anything. I don't need to say var, I don't need to say string, or anything like that. No data types, no keywords for that, just simply put it out there and away we go. And so now it's going to grab that and put that into there, and I can go ahead and use this. So now I could go ahead and say print, and let's say hello, and then let's put in that name, just like that. Let's also put an exclamation point at the end. Perfect. So let's go ahead and run this. Again, that little Shift Enter. Up at the very top in Visual Studio Code, it will now say, what is your name? And I'll say Christopher, and hit Enter. And now we'll print out, hello, Christopher. Now, when we're programming, one of the things that we're going to find is that we're going to want to do the same thing over and over and over again. And fortunately, every programming language under the sun will support this in a handful of different ways. One very common way to do this is by creating what's known as a function. And a function is basically it's like a button. It's something that I can go back to whenever I need to perform that task again. So let's go back up here and let's update my code a little bit. Let's put this into a function so that way I could call it. So the way that we create a function inside of Python is by using that keyword def, which is short for define. So def, short for define. And I'm going to give this a nice name. I'm going to call this display message, or maybe display greeting. And now what you're going to notice here is the fact that we've got a colon. Let me actually make this a scooch bigger. There we go. And I've got a colon right there. Now the colon is very important because now I'm indicating to Python what comes after this is going to be part of that function. Now the next thing that you'll notice is the fact that I tabbed in then those next two lines, that I tabbed in that name equals input, and I tabbed in that print statement. This is something that is relatively unique into Python, that white space is going to matter. In a lot of other programming languages, what you would see is something like this, where we've got a curly brace at the beginning and we've got a curly brace at the end. And that all works just fine in other programming languages. And it's a nice way to go ahead and indicate, hey, here's the body. Or you might have something like an end statement down at the bottom to indicate, hey, this is now over. That's not the way that Python behaves, though. The way that Python behaves is based around white space. What I really like about this is A, it can make my code feel a little bit cleaner because I don't have those curly braces floating around. But also B is that, especially for new developers, is the fact that it will help me make sure that I'm formatting my code well. If you learn nothing else, when you're first starting as a developer, learning to format your code well is probably the most important thing, because code that's formatted well is going to be easier to read. And I know that this may sound counterintuitive, but it is true that code is read many more times than it's written. So making sure that your code is readable, especially when you go back to it, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, is extremely important. So making sure that you have all of those little tabs, even if they're not required, is important. And it's one of those things that I really like about Python, is the fact that it will always make sure that I've got those tabs in there. It's required. So now let me create this function here, and you're going to notice that it doesn't prompt me for anything, because it's inside of a function with a nice little name. And so now I can say display greeting, boom, boom. And now if I run this cell, let's go ahead and run that. Now you'll notice it will come back and go, okay, what is your name? I'll go in and type in Christopher and hit enter. And now it will display out that hello, Christopher. Pretty cool. Last little thing about functions here. I want you to notice that good name, display greeting. This is built-in documentation. Now I know what this is going to do. I know that this is going to display out a greeting. Now you might still find yourself wanting to put in comments, and this is especially true if you're a new developer, because this is a great way to take notes in line. That if you're anything like me, and I know I am, I have a great attention span, but it's just really, really, really short. And so I wind up forgetting what it is that I may have done even just 3 minutes ago. So being able to put in a real quick comment here to say something like input gets information from the user is going to be extremely helpful. So that way, when I go back to this code a little bit later, especially again when I'm learning, that I'm going to be able to see, oh, okay, I know what this does. That's pretty cool. So don't be afraid at all to comment your code. Now, let's turn our attention here to a little scenario. And so I'm going to simulate a little bit of data science. And let's say, and this is going to be pretty common, that what I have is a text file. And that text file has some information. And what I want to be able to do is process this information. Python is custom built for something like this, for these types of applications, that the language gives me a lot of great support for this. And you're going to notice that there's a lot of great utilities that you can go grab that will allow you to really expand upon this. So you'll notice that we've got a handful of different rocks that were collected by a rover. I want to say this was a moon rover. Please don't quote me on that. But anyway, here's my list of rocks. And so what I want to do is I want to count them. Now, theoretically, if I'm a human, I could go in and 1, 2, 3, 4 basalts. And my breccia, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, 1, 2, 3, but that's not really efficient. This is why we have computers. Let's go ahead and let's use our computer to go ahead and do this for us. I'm going to pull the proverbial I'm on a cooking show, and I've already got a cake pre-baked in the oven that I'm going to pull out, and let's walk through how we're going to set this up. So what I've got here is I've got a little object. To be a little bit more technical, this is a dictionary object in Python parlance that's going to be used to count all of my rocks. This is relatively similar to what you saw with James's record, that you're going to notice that we've got certain names that we can then go ahead and give. So I've got my basalt, my breccia, my highland, and my regolith. And then you're going to notice out here that I've got all of my numbers. That's how I'm going to start counting things. So each one of those is going to start at 0. Now, I always like to just print out whatever it is that I'm working with. So it's kind of nice just to, print that out. Let's see what it is. And so if I run this, what you're going to notice is, sure enough, I've got all of those counters. Now what I want to do is I want to open up that text file. And again, Python helping me out here, trying to keep things relatively close to English, trying to keep things as simple as possible for these types of operations, gives me a helper function right here called open. All I have to do is give it the name of the file, which is rocks.txt. I can then go ahead and open that up, put that into file reader. And you'll notice that I can then print out individual lines or go grab individual lines by using that read line. So when I call print, that will then display it. So let's display that first line, and you're going to notice that will give me that reading rocks. Now what I want to do is I want to grab each rock and then add 1 to the appropriate rock counter. That sounds like something I'm going to want to do multiple times. So let's do that in a function. So you'll notice one more time that I've got a function here. There's my little def. This time, though, I'm going to pass in a piece of information. I'm going to pass in a rock. And I'm going to use that to go grab the appropriate counter. And let's add 1 to that. So let's go ahead and get our function. And then you're going to notice that we'll be able to go through all of our lines. So you'll notice that I'm going to use this little for loop. Let me actually do this instead. Let me go rock list equals. I'm just going to move this out, hopefully make this a little bit easier. Oop. By the way, when you're developing, little sound effects help. They do. Trust me on this. All right, so I'm going to use read lines here to go grab every single line, and I'm going to put that into rock list. And now I'm going to use a loop. So for every single rock that we found, I'm now going to remove any white space. Let's put in a comment there, remove white space. So things like a return at the end of a line, that's going to get rid of that. Let's print that out. And then let's add that into our count. Last little thing that I should do here, I should make sure that I close out that file reader. I'm going to be a good developer here. Let's do a close there. There we go. So now let's go ahead and run that. And there are all of my rocks printed out. And so now I can print out the results of that rock counter. And now you're going to see that I've got my basalt, my breccia, I've got my highland, etc. And I could even then start to, print all of that out. So I could convert that number into a string and then print out some little message like we found in this case for basalt rocks. Now I could continue to build and grow this, that I could start to make this dynamic. So I don't need to know the names of the rocks in advance, or I could, ask somebody, hey, where's the file? And then read that in. And that's, again, kind of one great thing about programming. And one great thing I think about Python is the fact that it can then just continue to grow with you. So there is Python. I personally think it's a fantastic programming language to start with. It's flexible, and you can really start to write almost any type of application with this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christopher. And I agree with all that. And also, when you mentioned making sounds while coding, I go beep, boop all the time. This way on my computer. So some questions for you, Christopher, if you will.
Yeah.
One from Michael. Can you send, and this was going back to what you were talking about before about printing, can you send the output to a physical printer too? Do you think? Have you had experience doing that?
You absolutely can. There is a built-in function for that. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, however, but the short answer to that question is yes, it is possible.
Awesome. And then from Crystal asked, what was the interface that you were using there in VS Code to help you write the Python code and see the output like that?
That's a great question. So the answer to that is it's called Jupyter Notebooks. And what you need to do is when you grab Visual Studio Code, there's also a little Python extension that you need to install. But honestly, if you just name a file, give it an extension of IPYNB, India, Papa, Yankee, November, Bravo, it will actually, Visual Studio Code will go, hey, wait a minute, there's an extension for this. Let me go ahead and grab that. Well, not for you, it'll prompt you, and then you can just go ahead and install it. But that's Jupyter Notebooks, and that's built in with Visual Studio Code with that Python extension. It's really cool.
That's awesome to hear. And one last question, actually, that I think you might find interesting. So Alan was asking, can you explain, because we saw C# and we saw Python, and I think to your accessibility, how would you describe the the difference between a scripting language and other types of programming language? I guess more like a compiled language. What would be your answer to that?
Yeah, so at a high level, a scripting or an interpreted language, which is what Python or JavaScript or those types of languages are, what they require is they require an interpreter. So basically something that can read it and go, oh, okay, I know what to do. And then on the fly, behind the scenes, they're going to tell the computer what to do with that.
Gotcha.
C#, however,
I have to cut you off. I'm sorry, Christopher, due to time there. I think that helps at least with the scripting language part.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so make sure you all check out the resources for this session that was shared. There's the Learn Python with a little bit of space, get all the basics of Python and learn the basics of C#. Also, there are resources for the entire Student Zone, or the GitHub repo, Microsoft Learn collection, and the Student Zone sessions on the build site. And just a couple of reminders, don't forget to fill out the survey. That'll be under the build site as well, under My Evaluations, and the Dev Mixtape Volume 1. Sign up for that. Next up for the Student Zone is a super cool session where one of my colleagues, Dimitri, will show you how technology to help create art using AI and Python. Really cool and interesting. So I hope you go check that out. Enjoy the rest of your journey through space in the Student Zone at Microsoft Build. Thank you.